Avodah Zarah 52a.
Hey, Rob, we're recording.
Yeah.
Okay. You got it. Are we ready? Okay. So we can go for it.
I'll speed past the Barakas round. They're going to get cold. See if it's one.
Yeah,
I had one.
So, okay, L'chaim, who are we having in mind? We're learning for the Neshamas of Mini, first of all, this week. Yeah. Wednesday night. That's Mina Bas, L'chaim Shaul Zayv Halevi. Mahon Mini. Shana Razor Bat. Connie, yours out this week? This Friday. Arichas Yomim. So that's Shana Razor Bat Connie. Yeah.
My grandfather, Yaub and Yitzhak. Your side on the land.
On Thursday night. Same your site as Harry's here.
And it's interesting is that, late Joel's son,
Yeah.
Gabriel David Ben Yosef Yehuda, and late Harry Murrells, Tzvi Ben Yitzhak.
Tzvi Ben Yitzhak.
Mark, you got we got our friend's name.
Well, Ashley.
I don't know Ashley's name.
Ashley's name.
I don't, I'm sorry, you've got it.
This is like for any time when they introduce the sponsors.
Should I check if they still are before
May they be. Yeah, we'll say Ashley. You can say Hashem knows who you're talking about. You know that we have some recordings of the Shiur from the past. I think that that there's some recordings. Les did a lot of recordings, and there's one where you catch Ashley's beautiful laugh. He tells a joke. You remember, he would tell a joke, and then there would be that
biggest laughter.
That golden laugh. I think we've got it on a recording somewhere. Anyways, so you found it.
Yeah, I got it. Every day. So it is Gabriel, no, Yosef Chaim ben Gabriel.
Yosef Chaim ben Gabriel. So we have him in mind for good stuff. May all these, bottom line, may all these neshamas be good advocates on high for all of us. Enough for the difficult stuff. Please God, the 9 days, we can talk about it a little bit afterwards. Let's learn a few lines of Gemora first, but these difficult and dark days should turn into happy days. The days should turn into happy, good days for our people in Eretz Yisrael and throughout the world. So we're going from line 16. The Gemora begins tonight with a question that's posed by 52a.
16.
Nun Beis Aleph. Nun Beis Amud Aleph, line 16. Sfaria is line 16. I'm not sure what the format is in our scroll. We're all using Safaria. Ba'ai Rav Hamnuna.
What the words?
Ba'ai Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna asked.
It's only the Gemara.
It starts with a bar.
Okay.
The whole Talmud starts.
We'll find it. Trust us, we'll find it.
Let's go.
We're going. Okay, Ba'ai Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna raised a question. We were talking about different things, and the Gemara is going to approach it from two angles. Things that are prohibited for hana, for benefit, and also it's also going to talk about ritual impurity, tumah, a special gezeira decree that was actually rabbinic that the sages made, equating implements of avodah zarah, equating implements of that are used for idol worship with things that are spiritually impure or unclean. But the question of Rav Hamnuna referred to somebody that welds a keli, a vessel, for the purposes of using it for avodah zarah. So in other words, until it was welded, it was useless. Sometimes when a kli or a vessel is broken, because it is broken, it's useless. You're unable to use it. So the mere repair turns it from useless into a useful entity again. Certain kinds of repairs are minor, but some repairs are so major that before you repair it, you can't use it. And once you repair it, it's tantamount to creating a new keli. If you've got a bucket with a hole, for instance, a bucket with a hole is pretty useless because a bucket is used to hold water, or a jug. Today, we don't think of it that way because all these kind of things are so disposable. You go and you buy another one in the plastics shop or whatever. But once upon a time, some of us might remember, people repaired things. They fixed things. And sometimes when you patch something or fixed it, you actually took it from being absolutely useless into full use again. In other words, if it was a vessel with a hole, for instance, and couldn't hold anything in it, the whiskey wouldn't be able to stay in the glass if there was a hole. By fixing it, by plugging the hole, or in this case, he's probably talking about something metal, because we're talking about welding, it's tantamount to actually creating the keli anew. And Rav Amnuna wants to know if somebody welded a metal vessel, for instance, for the purpose of using it for avodah zarah. Is that the same as making an implement for avodah zarah from scratch? Or is it different because initially that's not how it was made? That's his question. And like in the usual style of Gemora, the question is posed in a cryptic fashion and unpacked afterwards for which direction it actually goes. So one has to avoid making assumptions right away. That's the style of Gemora. Ritech kli avodah zarah. He welded a vessel for the purposes of idol worship. He wanted to go and serve some kind of getchka, some kind of idol deity, some kind of culty thing that they do. And in order to do that, he needed, for whatever the ritual was, a vessel. So he takes this broken vessel and he welds it. The challenge is that he's welding it l'shem avodah zarah. The purpose is he's dedicating it to idol worship. What is the ruling? If a Jew now gets hold of this vessel on two counts, can we use it? Can we not use it? And furthermore, what is its status from a point of view of purity and impurity? This is something we don't deal with as much in today's day and age. In the time of the temple, it was very important to ascertain whether vessels were tahir, tameh, certain holy foods couldn't be placed in a vessel if it wasn't spiritually pure. And our sages had made a gezerah decree, it was a rabbinic decree, that vessels, kalim, that were used for idolatrous purposes would be tantamount to being spiritually impure. So even though the Torah itself didn't impose this type of ban, the sages came along and imposed it. But the Gemara wants to know, avodah zarah the man. Whose avodah zarah are we talking about? We have the realm of avodah zarah, of things which are used for spiritual purposes that are antithetical to divinity, to God and godliness. There is a difference between the avodah zarah of a Jew and the avodah zarah of a non-Jew. So the Gemara wants to know, Ilaima avodah zarah the nachri. If you're talking about the avodah zarah of a Gentile, that was what he did when he went and welded this vessel to use it. Bain l'Rabbi Yishmael, bain l'Rabbi Akiva. Whether you follow the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva, if you remember, we had been through a debate between Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva regarding the immediacy of how something is affected. Is it affected from the time it is actually crafted and made, or only affected from the time it's actually served? Remember that difference of opinion? That according to one opinion, as a person makes something and manufactures it for the wrong reasons, it immediately takes upon itself a bad status. But according to the other, it's only after they actually take it and use it, l'shem avodah zarah, that it's a problem. However, what we're talking about here is mashamshay avodah zarah hain. These are actually accessories of avodah zarah, not the avodah zarah themselves. A little bit like the word, we're talking shul before. In the old days, the shul had a shamash. He served. He made sure that everything was in place, that the sidurim were put out and the sidurim were put back. And he made sure that all the accessory peripheral issues were taken care of. Mashamshay avodah zarah, accessories for avodah zarah, are not necessarily the avodah zarah itself. According to everybody, accessories of avodah zarah do not become prohibited until actual service. So even if you're talking about the idol itself, the actual getchka, that this particular type of group would serve. So let's say they served a particular idol or statue or whatever it was, and we said that that is quite serious. The accessories to it would not be on the same level of severity, and these are accessories. And Mashamshi Avodah Zarah, accessories to Avodah Zarah, are only prohibited once actually served, whether according to Rabbi Yishmael, whether according to Rabbi Akiva. And therefore,
used before it was repaired. So if it was an accessory to,
so he's going to talk about before it was repaired afterwards. Here it looks like he's asking, it was repaired for the purpose of you, and then, but he's actually going to talk about that as well. In other words, what happens if it was utilized for the wrong reasons before, and then afterwards fixed. Elobat, the Gemora concludes, struggling with the winter chills. Elobat avodah zarah de Yisrael. It must be that we're talking over here about the avodah zarah of a Jew, because of the immediacy that we seem to be talking about here, something that should immediately become problematic. It would seem, says the avodah zarah, that we're talking about a vessel that actually was served or fixed or whatever happened by a Jew. Unfortunately, Jews shouldn't get involved in avodah zarah, but yep, unfortunately, everyone exercises their free choice, and things go wrong too. So the Gemara says, Aliba Daman, whose opinion are we going with over here? Ilema Liba de Rabbi Akiva. So let's start off with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the one who said that when it comes to a Jew, the avodah zarah only becomes effective at the point of service. In other words, Rabbi Akiva's opinion was that if a Jewish craftsman crafts something, an idol, even if he dedicated it or did it for the purposes of idolatry, the problem only sets in once he actually serves it. If according to Rabbi Akiva, a Jew who is carving out an idol, for instance, for service in some kind of, how would you call it, temple or cult or whatever kind of avodah zarah it is. And Rabbi Akiva's view is that when a Jew gets involved in avodah zarah, the effect is only applicable once it actually is served. If that's the case with the idol itself, then definitely the accessory can't be worse. If you're talking about the fact that the idol itself that a Jew made, remember we always went back to the story of Abraham and his father. Abraham had a whole shop. He had a branch in Santon City. What's that? His father. Sorry, he worked for his father in that branch, selling idols.
Factory manager.
Factory manager. So if we're saying that when it comes to a Jew, the problem is only when it's served, well, the accessories definitely would not be a problem until served. But according to Rabbi Yishmael, who said that when a Jew makes an idol, the actual idol, it is prohibited immediately, how do we view the accessories? Now, it sounds very technical, this, but one has to always, the trick with Gemora is to try and push the details aside. Sometimes, like driving down the highway, you have to sometimes forget about the exits and focus on the middle lane. And the middle lane over here is the Gemora is assessing accessories to idol worship and what their relationship is to the main idol and what their relationship is to being crafted or manufactured by a Jew and or not a Jew. My Mashamshin. So the Gemara says, what is the ruling with regard to accessories? Mashamshin mi Mashamshin gamrinan. Do we how would you learn the law of accessories? In other words, how would you try to figure out what is the view of the sages with regard to accessories to idol worship? When you go into the shop and you say, I want to buy an idol and I want to buy everything that goes with it. I want all the aftermarket products.
What the accessories?
Sorry, all the accessories.
Chicken,
How do you view the accessories?
Like those free whiskey glasses, Mark, that come with the
Well,
bottle.
that's it, exactly. It's the free whiskey glasses that come in a bottle. Are you allowed to drink another brand's whiskey in the same glass?
We'll have to check in Mark.
Are you allowed to put Coke in the whiskey with a glass? So,
no,
no way.
watch it.
So, my mashamshin mi mashamshin gamrinan. Would you learn accessories from accessories? In other words, would we say that if you want to know how to halachically deal with accessories to idols, learn about the accessories that Jews make for idols from the accessories that Gentiles make? In other words, maybe the Gemora is suggesting that the ruling would be the same. Idol worship is idol worship. So if the accessories to idol worship manufactured by Gentiles works in a certain kind of way, follows a certain pattern, then it should be that the accessories to idol worship made by Jews should follow the same pattern. Mashamshin mi mashamshin gomrinan. Ma hasam, just like over there. Ad sheyei ovedu, by the non-Jews who manufacture accessories for idol worship. We say that they are not a problem until they're actually served. He went and made them so you can serve an idol. But if you want to use it to make your chicken soup or your cholent instead, go ahead and use it. You know, you buy something in a shop, you might have a different purpose than the person who made it. It's not your problem. They made it for one reason, you used it for another. Here also, you might say that the accessories to idol worship made by a Jew, the issue would be until it's actually served, it's not a problem. By Dilma, or maybe Mina Gomar, from it itself, you resolve it. In other words, figure out the accessories to idol worship made by a Jew from the idol itself made by a Jew. Look at what happens when a Jew himself, herself, goes and makes an idol. They're a sculptor or an artist or whatever they might be, and they go and unfortunately use their talents that Hashem gave them the wrong way. And instead of making something holy, they make something the opposite. And we say that in that case it is immediately prohibited. So let the accessory also be immediately prohibited. Maybe from it itself, just like it itself, the idol, the thing that they've carved out, is immediately prohibited. The accessories too, asurin miyad, would be immediately prohibited. So in other words, the accessories to idol worship made by a Jew, do we learn them on the one hand from the accessories to idol worship made by a Gentile, or do we learn them from the idol itself made by a Jew? Are you looking for something similar in the vessel, or are you looking for something similar in the manufacturer, basically, in who actually made it? That's basically the Gemora unpacking the question. Says the Gemora something furthermore. Hold on a second, we're talking here about somebody that took a vessel. We're talking over here about repair, as we said at the beginning, because Rav Hamnuna spoke about ritech. Ritech means to weld. He welded something. Until he welded it, it was broken. It was useless. The welding was a powerful action because besides for being a repair, it wasn't a minor repair. It turned something useless into something useful. A vessel that till now was not a receptacle to hold something became a receptacle to hold something. But still, it existed already. He didn't make it. Somebody earlier on, some other craftsman or manufacturer had made it. I mean, you must remember that in those days, people didn't manufacture things in mass. They never had, this is prior to the, what do they call it? The Industrial Revolution. So, you know, a craftsman made one and he might have gotten faster, but still each thing that he made was an individual exercise. So the Gemara says, hold on a second. why are we getting so hung up on a repair? Why don't we talk about the fact that he may have made the whole thing from scratch? Why was the question if you repair something for Avodah Zarah? My area de kama boile ritachkli to boile also. Why is Rav Hamnuna focusing or targeting a repair? As important as a repair as it might be, that the repair itself causes the vessel to be useful again, that had been useless, but go to scratch, start the book from the beginning. What if a Jew went and made a vessel for Avodah Zarah from a block of raw material? There was never any vessel, and he took a block of raw material, and he's a craftsman, and he made it. What's this business about repair? What are you gaining by making the example more complicated? It's a typical Talmudic way of thinking, is why not go to the most general aspect? And from there, you can zone down or focus on more specific things. Let's talk about somebody creating an accessory to Avodah Zarah. He hasn't yet utilized it or served, but he has created it. He is a sculptor. He sculpted a statue or an ornament from scratch, from the material or the block that it was. Why are we hung up here about welding and fixing? So the Gemora says, I'll tell you why we got involved with welding. Because the Gemora wanted to discuss, the purpose of this example is the Gemora wanted to discuss something that had a status, lost its status, and got the status back again. And I think that's what you were hinting at, Ivan. When you were saying before, what about if it was before Avodah Zarah? We had learned that sometimes something that is Avodah Zarah loses its status. One of the ways that an article of Avodah Zarah loses its impure status is by being broken. If an implement or a vessel was manufactured for the purposes of Avodah Zarah, so now a Jew can't use it, and it has a certain status of impurity. What happens if it breaks? We learned that the fact that it breaks and becomes useless loses its status as a keli. It's no longer a good jug, because if you pour anything in it, it's going to disappear. It's going to fall out the bottom. So now it's lost its status as a vessel. It loses its impure status and its prohibition. If you want to use it for another purpose, you want to grind it and use the metal, or you want to stick it in the braai if it's wood, or the fireplace, you have a different use for that keli than it was originally made for. You have different use for it. You can use it because its idolatrous status was based on its status as a jug. Now that it's no longer a working jug or a working barrel or a working whatever it is, it has lost its Avodah Zarah status.
But Rob, didn't you learn?
Now,
that he wants to
sorry,
learn that
yeah.
it retains its status in terms of that you can't benefit from.
Different opinions. You're right. We learned in one place
if it was
that it
direct.
retains its status, but there are different opinions, and also depends on the level at which it's broken, and it depends on if people will still serve it. This is an accessory which has a specific purpose, and if it loses the ability to perform in that purpose, then it's a problem. Like what we would have learned there was, let's say you have a statue which is an idol. They're serving the statue. Somehow, I don't know, some guy by mistake crashed into it. He broke off a piece of it. The question then would be, will those who serve it continue to serve it? Will they say that it retains its status? They'll continue to come there and pray, do their rituals, do offerings. Or will they say, hold on a second, if that guy's broken, he's no longer a god, he's no longer a deity. If it retains its ability to be respected, then the status is not revoked. Here we're talking about the keli vessel. The vessel is an implement or an accessory that needs to be used for Avodah Zarah. The moment it loses, it's not the Avodah Zarah itself.
So it's
Exactly.
not removed,
So in other words, it's one step removed from Avodah Zarah itself. The other thing is
behind the goal.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I mean, if it's a golf club and it can't hit the ball because the head of it or whatever's been broken off, then what are you doing with it? You can't use it the way you used to use it. So you might have a use for a stick. Maybe someone's misbehaving, but it's still not a club. You know, you can't strike or putt or whatever it is. So the idea is, the Gemora says that Rav Hamnuna wanted to unpack the idea what if something was contaminated with the impurity of Avodah Zarah, and then it broke, and then it lost that status of impurity, and then afterwards somebody comes and fixes it? Do we say that on repair, it reverts back to that negative status, or does it lose that negative status forever? In other words, the sages came along, Chazal, the rabbis came along and said, by the way, Avodah Zarah, we are going to put in the category of Tumah, of spiritual uncleanliness. It isn't there automatically in the Torah laws, Midoraita. In the Torah laws of spiritual impurity, Avodah Zarah was not included originally. The Torah said you're not allowed to serve idols, you're not allowed to benefit from them. There's an Isur Hana, but the Torah did not impose spiritual impurity on implementing Avodah Zarah in Torah law. The rabbis did. They came along and did that. That which they did, imposing spiritual impurity on a vessel of Avodah Zarah, now the vessel breaks, the status of impurity disappears, somebody comes and fixes it, does it come back again? That is, says the Gemora, what Rav Hamnuna was trying to investigate. And that's the reason why his question and his subject matter was welding a broken vessel. Because when you weld a broken vessel, you're recreating a vessel that was around before. If you make a vessel from scratch, it's new. But if you weld something that was broken, you're recreating something that existed before. If it existed before and it had a status of Avodah Zarah and a status of ritual impurity, it lost that status when it broke, so I can now come along, chuck it in my fireplace, use it as a soccer ball, whatever other use you might have is fine. Somebody comes and fixes it, it's now fixed. Does it get back that impurity? So does it get back that original status?
It was a kalim, could you?
If we read it inside, yeah, we could say. And no, he talks about that too. Gee, you're on a roll tonight. He talks about dunking it as well. So Ivan, no wonder he's going to Israel. You're going to study.
Maybe I should. Sorry, what did you say?
He spoke about dropping it in a mikveh, dunking it to purify it, and he comes. It's also in the next few lines. Rav Hamnuna mishum tumu yashana kama bailei. The Gemora says Rav Hamnuna was questioning the concept of retro or previous tuma, spiritual impurity. That none, because we had learned in a Mishnah, clay matoches, vessels, metal vessels, pshutayan u'mekableyan temayan. There was a Mishnah which taught that when it comes to metal vessels, whether they have receptacles, in other words, being a vessel that has like a, what we call it, a concave, it can be filled with something, or if it's flat, like a tray, but the fact is it's a vessel. Both of them, if they're used for Avodah Zarah, they are spiritually impure by a gezeira of the rabbis, because they were used for idolatrous purposes. However, nishtabru tahiru, if they broke, they become pure. Chazar v'asan kailim, what happens if he repaired them and made them kailim again? Yachzeru l'tumah yashana, they return to their original state of impurity. This is what he was trying to bring out. And this was the question of Rav Hamnuna. When the state of spiritual impurity returns, and this is not only about Avodah Zarah, it's about any type of spiritual impurity. So basically, by the way, the reason we have the concept of tefillas kalim, that we take new dishes, etc., to the mikveh, is because of the spiritual impurity that they may have from having been in the possession of people that aren't Jewish. Yeah. And this was his question. When the tumah comes back, if a person has a vessel that was spiritually unclean, then it broke and then it became purified by breaking. Then it got fixed and it became impure again because it got fixed. Hana milala tumah d'oraisa, does that apply only with regard to the Torah perspective on tumah? Tumah d'oraisa. Aval tumah d'rabbanan, but maybe we would say that spiritual impurity that is from the rabbi's law is not the same, doesn't come back, doesn't bounce back, or maybe we say it makes no difference. So So why didn't he ask this question, says the Gemora, with regard to other examples of spiritual impurity that was designated by rabbis? Why did he focus on avodah zarah, on the concept of idolatrous use? So the Gemara explains, and this is the last paragraph in the subject. He wanted to establish one question that stemmed out of another question. Sometimes someone opens a question or a subject, and somebody says, it's not one question, it's two. What happened with Rav Hamnuna is he asked a question, and in his question was born a second question. There was two questions. One question was Tumah derabanan mihadra or lo yahadra, spiritual impurity that's derabanan, that's rabbinically induced. Does it return or does it not return? In other words, the rule that we just said, that Torah impurity, for example, a vessel that became impure by contact with the dead, and then broke, and then got repaired. We said when it comes to Torah impurity, the impurity returns, bounces back on repair. Does that apply to rabbinic impurity too? That's the question. Can we assume that in the same way that there's a rule that Torah impurity bounces back on repair, rabbinic impurity bounces back on repair? The Tim Tzaloimer, and should you wish to say, Lo Hadra, it doesn't bounce back. Tumah de Avodah Zarah, maybe the Tumah of Avodah Zarah, of idolatrous practice, is more stringent than other rabbinic impurities. Mishum Chumra de Avodah Zarah. There were many places where the rabbis placed what was called Chumra, means a stringency, a severity. They placed an additional severity on matters of Avodah Zarah. They said that Avodah Zarah is a severe thing because it has to do with Merida B'Malchus, rebelling against Hashem above, serving deities other than Hashem. So therefore, they took it more stringent and severe than other things. So it could be that even though other types of impurity that are rabbinic, let's say something became impure, whatever it is, from contact with, I don't know what, creepy crawly things, dead animals, whatever it might be. And let's say that in the particular definition of how something became impure, it did not contract Torah impurity, but only rabbinic impurity. In other words, the rabbis had created extra levels of impurity. And that then we might have said the rule of tum'ah, of spiritual impurity, coming back again because something returns to its original state or is repaired, does not apply. But maybe chumra de avodah zarah, maybe when it came to avodah zarah, mishavyur rabbanon ketumo d'oraisa, maybe the rabbis actually placed the ban of spiritual impurity related to avodah zarah and equated it d'oraisa with Torah impurity, or perhaps not. That's the question. When the rabbis came along and said that avodah zarah, idolatrous service, is such a bad thing that we're going to impose a ban of spiritual impurity on it, we're going to consider it. There's a particular verse in Tehillim. It talks about Bacher, and what does it say? It says something, we had it quoted, they ate from the offerings of the dead. There was a comparative verse that compares the severe type of spiritual impurity that comes from bodies, that comes from the dead, to service of avodah zarah. The rabbis came and said, this is such a serious thing that we're going to consider it like the most severe form of impurity. So perhaps, says the Gemora, that the spiritual impurity imposed on vessels because of avodah zarah is not like rabbinic, although it was imposed by the rabbis, but maybe the rabbis gave it the severity of a Torah-based spiritual impurity, or maybe not. And the answer over there is teiku. The Gemara says it's an unresolved question. It stands unresolved. There's no answer to this question.
Earlier on, all the rules about avodah zarah and the deities that the Goy breaks the deity.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that more. That he can revoke the status more than that was. Yeah,
it could be divrei sofrim.
Yeah,
The
Koach and rabbis. But just to catch a quick word beyond this, because it's already 9:27.
Just summarize that.
Sorry. You want to summarize it. So basically, the last part, the Gemara was saying was that particular imposition or ban that the rabbis came along and said that implements used for avodah zarah should be considered to be spiritually impure. We want to know what level of severity did they impose. Did they impose a level of severity exactly similar to Torah impurity? In other words, if you look at Torah law of what governs spiritual impurity, contact with the dead, etc., is that what the rabbis wanted to put on accessories to avodah zarah, or was it like the lower level spiritual impurity that they imposed in other areas of spiritual impurity? Like, for instance, that the person who touched the person who touched the person who touched the body. If you remember when we learn the laws of Tumah, we learn it's a little bit like a transformer. As it moves from one to the other, it grades down. There's a downgrade in the level of severity. So what level of severity did the rabbis impose on implements that were used for avodah zarah?
Was it more severe than?
Was it more severe or less severe than the other injunctions? And the Gemora says we're unable to answer that. It remains unresolved. We don't know.
Okay.
Well, it should be the same.
Mhm.
If you manufacture new, or you take something broken, like
Yeah.
reactivate it, it's the same thing. I don't know what-
Must be at least equivalent.
Sorry. No, the new and the reactivate is not the question. The new and the reactivate. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Frankly, I'm not dedicating to avodah zarah. That's really what we're talking about now.
No, but hold on a second. If it's your plate, he can't dedicate someone else's property. Has to be his plate.
No.
There's all yeah. You can't. You can't. No, exactly. Must be his own. There's all different laws. You can't make avodah zarah out of somebody else's stuff. So basically, yeah.
And if we talk the thing that he welded also, he maybe found it in the scrapyard, which was FKR, and put it together, back together.
No, but this specific was.
I had a very interesting thing. Some years ago, somebody called me on behalf of a particular church, and they said, where's a good price that you can get in bulk talaisim? We've got a few Jewish bookshops. There's the Sefer Stam. A particular church was looking for a few dozen talaisim. Believe it or not. I never heard of this before, but they literally were. And I wasn't. No, it was not a real church. And I wasn't sure what to do. In other words, do you allow them? Do you start giving them, okay, there's the Kollel bookshop, there's Chabad books, put in your order, buy what you want. I wasn't familiar with, like, what do you actually do? Do you want them? And I'm not sure what actually happened. I didn't share the number. I didn't go looking to send that kind of business their way. But I did hear that it could be that if it's never been used before, then it's never been used before. Then they take it and use it. Okay, it was made l'shem shamayim, but somehow it goes a different direction. And who knows anyways what they're going to do with it. They may not use it for full out avodah zarah. It's not necessarily an actual rite or ritual in what they're doing. It might be just a uniform or a decorative or aesthetic thing. It's not necessarily where they're going to actually apply it in a form of avodah zarah. But anyway, I heard from one of them it's not a problem that they should use it. I don't know. I mean, I'm opening the floor and closing it. Sure. But certainly not my chalice.
But their brachas made.
Okay, sorry, just a quick word for the day. So to actually today's Hayom Yom, today's motto of the day, which is a beautiful one, I can find it here. But anyway, is that the Rebbe said in the name of his father-in-law that when Mashiach comes, you're supposed to talk about the redemption during the 9 days. We hope that these days will change to better days and redemptive days. One of the interesting things that will happen when Mashiach comes is we'll yearn for the days of Galus. We'll regret the opportunity that we didn't take up. So that although things are tough and dark and difficult and challenging, as often business people will tell you that sometimes in the toughest times, the opportunities are very big. And one of the ironic things is that in Galus, in the difficult times that we live in, the spiritual opportunities are very powerful. And so the Rebbe said, my father-in-law told me that when Mashiach will come, we'll yearn backwards for the days that we ourselves could have done so much more to take advantage, to use the great opportunities to increase in our avodah, in our service of Hashem, and increasing divinity and awareness and good things in the world in those times when there was greater opportunity inside the difficulties. The difficulty, darkness, all these things bring opportunity, and we should be able to seize the opportunity and transform it into good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Did you all see?
You
You see the offer hostages were